Hi, so in this video, I want to show you guys how to actually annotate the textbook. This is our first exploration of the year here, and I'm going to use an example paragraph to show you how to do this. But I also wanted to show you that the textbook has a play audio feature that allows you to have the textbook be read to you. So if you click on that button,
Exploration 1 Systems and System Models. Throughout history, humans have strived to understand the world around us. A system is a set of interacting components
so you
considered
can
to be a distinct entity for the
so you can click on a paragraph and it will switch to that paragraph. Check it out.
purpose of study or boundaries define the space of the system to separate.
So that's a pretty cool feature, and especially if you are reading it, it's helpful to read it out loud or have someone read it to you out loud. Because especially if you read it yourself out loud, because then your brain is processing the information three times: once with your eyes, once with for you to actually speak the words, and again when you hear them. So having someone read it to you out loud, or having you read it out loud, or read along, are great ways to help you absorb more of the information. It also can help you stay on pace and not spend too long on one section or get distracted. Notice there's also these yellow boxes. These are those workbook questions that you can do in my class. I talk about that in another video. And then sometimes you have a check for understanding. And these are questions that ask to see if you're being paying attention to what's going on in the text. And if you answer wrong, they usually give you a hint to help you get it right. And then you can try again and see how you do. So that's really helpful, and I will definitely do those as I read. I'd skip the yellow box questions into the very end of my reading when I'm done taking notes or learning the material, but I will definitely do the checks for understanding as I go along. Right? Sometimes there's these example boxes or activity boxes too that work. They are all really nice ways, and a lot of these check for understanding boxes load as you are going through it. This is also another type of checks for understanding, except that it asks you to type. The cool thing is that even if you type something that's not right, you can see a sample answer to see what you probably should have said, right? So there's also, I want to note, these yellow words, which are vocabulary words. And when you click on them, you can actually see a detailed definition of what are very important keywords of the chapter. Now, in some lessons, you will also find these hands-on labs or other activities which are linked with PDFs. Now, some of them, and you can see the text below loading, but that's what I was saying. Some of them you can actually um, um, do it for credit in my class, and they will usually be directly referenced or linked in Schoology as a side quest or an activity. But some of them are labs which, if we're doing a class online, they have to be replaced with a different lab on Gizmo or a different activity. So when you see these hands-on labs, get inspired by them, but don't waste time opening it or doing them. You can ask me about them. Ask me if there's an alternative activity that you can actually do and engage with. But you shouldn't be worried about doing that while you're reading either. So you're just going to skip that stuff as well. So uh, basically, I would read and annotate as I go along. I would answer all the checks for understanding boxes, all of the interactive activities as I'm reading. But I'll skip any hands-on lab or golden part until after I'm done reading and taking notes. Um, that's kind of how I would do my process. And also, as far as taking notes, I actually would annotate the entire uh, lesson, the entire exploration first. Read the entire exploration and annotate it first before worrying about taking notes on it. You go back to the start and take notes on it, or after you annotate, you do those golden box questions on your evidence workbook. Either one. But I would start by just reading and annotating, and then worry about doing anything extra like the golden boxes or taking notes. But let's show you how to annotate one paragraph. And I would read and annotate one paragraph at a time, or at most a section of the textbook at a time. Sometimes I'll do one section, and a section is basically each part that has this like major title like this. So I do it one paragraph at a time or one section at a time at the very least. But let's take a look at this paragraph right here on boundaries and components and try to annotate that. So when you're annotating, What you want to do first is you want to read that paragraph. And I'm going to try to read along with the textbook.
Separate that system. Boundaries define the
Define the
space
space
of the
of the
system
system
to
to
separate
separate
that
that
system
system
from the
from the
rest
rest
of
of
the
the
universe.
universe.
A
A
cellular
cellular
phone
phone
is a
is a
system of
system of
electronics
electronics
contained
contained
in
in
a
a
protective
protective
covering.
covering.
The
The
components
component
are
are
all
all
the
the
parts
parts
of
of
the
the
system
system
that
that
interact
interact
to
to
help
help
the
the
system
system
carry
carry
out
out
specific
specific
functions.
functions. For
For
example,
example, a
a cell
cellular
phone
phone needs the
is
parts
parts
described in
described in
the
the
image
image
above
above
to
to
function
function
properly.
properly.
Together,
Together,
the
the
components
components
send
send
and
and
receive
receive
radio
radio
signals
signals
and
and
transform
transform
them
them
into
into
useful
useful
communication,
communication,
such
such
as
as
text
text
messages.
messages. Sometimes it's hard to follow along and read along, and I would prefer either to have it read for me or to read it myself out loud. Whichever way works best for you, that's what I would start. Then you're going to read the paragraph again, except this time you're going to underline key words that scientists or biologists would use. These are the words that can help us understand the meaning of the sentence in a scientific context. So, boundaries, space, system, universe, cellular phone, right? These are all the technical words. Now, if the same word shows up again, I'm not going to underline it again. Here's system again. I'm not sure I need to underline it again. Here's another one, components. That's got to be an important word because if I didn't know what it was, it wouldn't even be in the title, right? Um, functions, all right? So these are some key words that you would need to read in order to understand the thing. The next step we want to do is that as after you're reading, there's like a word that you don't really know what that word means. You might want to look that word up on a dictionary. Now, there's not any big word here that jumps at me as something that I might not be able to get as a context clue, but just to show you how that works, let's say I didn't know what interact means, right? Which probably should be another underlined word because that's a biology word too. But let's say I didn't know what it means. I will look that up on a dictionary online and then add a note to that word. Okay, so let's look it up. Let's see what interact means. Ah, to have an effect on another. Okay, so to have an effect on another. So you didn't see me searching it, but I just went to a different browser screen and searched for that on a different screen. And now, if I save and close that, I'm going to have a yellow word tagged. That's the word that I had that I stopped. Now, always better to use context clues to try to figure out what that word means instead of slowing you down. But if you really don't know, rather than just move on, sometimes it's better to try to like figure out what that word is, especially if you're doing that as part of a learning process. If I'm taking a test or an SAT or something, I might read past the word unless it's a key word in the sentence, um, and try to use context clues if I absolutely need to. But in this case, I want to know what the words mean because I'm trying to learn from this textbook. So I make sure that I go through each one of them. And the cool thing is that after you click on that note, it actually pops up as a definition, just like it would if you clicked in one of those yellow words, right? So that's a pretty cool feature that the textbook lets you do. It lets you take notes on that. The next step is to highlight in red the parts of the textbook which are clearly teaching you something. Like, for example, this first word here, boundaries define the space of the system that separates the system from the rest of the universe. That is the textbook essentially defining what a boundary is and explaining that to you. So I consider that a key part of the paragraph, and we highlight that in red. Now, parts of the paragraph which are giving you elaboration or examples of that concept, I highlight in green. And that's what's happening here with this next sentence, because it's giving an example of a boundary, right? Saying the protective covering around the cell phone is a boundary. It gives you another teaching moment where it defines components, which are parts of the system that perform a specific function. By the way, if you highlight that in red, you might need it overrid my yellow tag. So you might need to redo that tag if you want to keep it as a yellow tag. The last highlighting is the one that takes. And then again, the rest of the paragraph is giving you an example of how what a component is and how they work together to actually help the system operate. So in this manner, I have red words to actually help me uh, focus on what's the key part of the paragraph, and then green words to help me focus on the examples. And then when I'm doing notes, this makes my life easier. I'm going to use the key underlined words as key words to mention in my notes. I'm going to put the red stuff on my definition column if I'm doing Cornell notes, and the green stuff on my examples column if I'm doing Cornell notes. So annotating can be a great way to help you pay attention to what the textbook is reading and improve your retention, because now you not only read it out loud, which is 3 times processing, but you also read it again to underline and then again to highlight. So that really helps you connect with the textbook. And I would repeat this process for all the textbook as I'm going through it, skipping the yellow boxes for now, but definitely answering all of these checks for understanding until I hit the end of the textbook. Then when I get to the end, I might go back to the start and do those yellow workbook questions in my workbook. And I'll talk about that in a future video. So I hope you found that helpful.